So what are the foods, if we look at just say tryptophan as a precursor for serotonin?
Serotonin, yeah.
What are the foods that are going to be providing that precursor to that happy neurotransmitter?
So, we look at things like we want to have a balanced plate, right? Lots of vegetables, especially, like green leafy vegetables, protein, all of that sort of thing, minimally processed, paying attention to oils, right? All of that, sugar. It's really big. And what's interesting, I think sometimes parents get really overwhelmed because it just feels like one more thing and we're all so busy. But I think when we think about it from the lens of creativity, we can start to find ways to incorporate different nutritional awareness and education, especially with children. The Growing Chefs, the organization I was talking to you about, with the founder, we were a part of in Ontario, this Ontario Food Network, so that's in Canada, where we were trying to advocate for having nutritional curriculum incorporated into schools. And this was really challenging because teachers are so busy. But our point was that if children are already learning math, then why not have the fractions that they're learning be a half a cup of this and a quarter cup of that? And I actually had the head of Growing Chefs email me recently, and we were doing this work 10 years ago, and it just got implemented in curriculum recently.
Wow.
That's great.
Congratulations.
So it's incredible, but this is where it's like, okay, how do we, with the children, find ways to do what we're already doing and incorporate it? And so the extension of what is on our plate, it's also involving the children in the process of cooking whenever possible, right? And teaching them. And, maybe they are young and they can't cut things, but maybe they can wash something, or but getting them involved before they sit down at the dinner table is something that we're doing already, we're cooking, but when we incorporate them and teach them from the beginning, even grocery shopping, right? Going to the grocery store, and this is why we're getting this, and walking around the outside of the grocery store, right? And, buying healthy fruits and vegetables, but explaining to them why, right? Why it's important, not just saying eat this, but and then the other thing is if you ask a child when they eat something healthy, how do you feel after? They have more energy, right? Helping them make that connection that when they put healthy food in their body, they feel better versus when they go to a birthday party and they eat tons of cake and sugar and they come home and they can't regulate their mood and then they crash, right? But helping them understand the connection between the food they put in their body and their feelings, it can help them to start to make those changes and the awareness of it and that connection because they're so linked.
So one example that probably everybody knows, including children, is, eating turkey and falling sleepy.
Yeah, right? Thanksgiving dinner.
So Thanksgiving. And why is that? Because the turkey has high levels of tryptophan. Which create the serotonin, which help, that sort of regulate the mood. But the key that example is that that's true for every food we put in our body. That's just an example that people are familiar with. But if we address each food like that and put together that, balanced plate, proteins, vegetables, a few carbohydrates, and the right oils, especially the omega-3s, then we're actually creating that mood from the inside.
That's right.
And
so that's what I wanted to get to because, as often as possible, we want these real high-level, actionable, what can folks do at home? And so what I hear you both saying is that there are foods that can make you happy. For example, this might not be on the list of all, early age introduction. I mean, some of these are going to happen when the child's 3, 4, 5, 6 or older. And by the way, let's reiterate, this is another example of, role playing or at least modeling. Because if you're not eating healthy, your child's probably not going to eat healthy either. But pineapple, so why? Because it contains, B vitamins. Chocolate, why? Because it contains serotonergic precursors. Tomatoes, why? Because it's got lycopene. And all of these additional reasons. So this is a learning or teaching opportunity, a moment where maybe you're providing your child a snack and you can sort of insinuate, these strawberries here contain anthocyanidins, which may reduce stress and allow you to be happier. But, and here's the big but we can't always eat ourselves to therapeutic levels of, health conferring benefit. And what I mean by that is, if somebody's sad or a child's sad, feeding them strawberries is not going to make them instantly happy.
Sure.
Nor necessarily should they be, right? But, but where I wanted to go was child life in part manufactures ingredients that you could probably never put on a child's plate at high enough levels that could have their brains do certain things. Omega-3s is one example. You just said it. explain, EPA, DHA, and what you've done to make it easier, tasty, and everything else with the Child Life Omega-3.
So just quickly, historically, omega-3s mostly found in high density in fish oils. So if we look back, cod liver oil was probably the original nutritional supplement in history. 100 years ago, parents were giving their children cod liver oil because somehow they grew up a little smarter and healthier. Now we know that omega-3s contain EPA and DHA. The DHA is the key fatty acid found in the brain. So over 50% of the brain is made from fats and oils, and 50% of those fats and oils is just DHA. So that's what the body neuron brain cell is made from, and the myelin sheath that are around the wire to help communication. So if we just understand that, we can give our children, the sources of omega-3s. But then supplementing it, you can get a much higher volume. And my opinion these days is that even when a parent does everything they can for their child to eat healthy, clean, organic all the time, still it's that 90-10 rule. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's not going to be 100%. So what we need to do to keep ahead of that curve these days is give our children those extra nutrients that make up for what they're not getting in their diet, but also help protect them from anything they shouldn't be getting in their diet, meaning the food additives, colorings, artificial flavors, all of those things. So we can do both. We can very easily do both if we give the right supplementation.
Absolutely. Does Dr. Mandich supplement with anything?
I do. I do. Yes.
What do you do if you want to hear that? Do you recommend that there potentially is science out there for certain ingredients that may actually boost the happiness index?
Well, the reality is that we try our best, right? But sometimes we can't get all of our nutrients from food, right? I take a fish oil. That's really important. And I take a B vitamin because I like my B vitamins. You know what? I feel like as an adult, one of the good tests is if you're not sure, try taking something for a while and stop taking it and see if you notice a difference. Oh,
I do that all
the
time.
Because, I've also done a lot of yoga trainings in my life. And one of my yoga teachers, Jill Miller, she used to say, we're students of our body and our body is our best teacher. And so I think that when we have the awareness of how we feel, and I think that also a lot of us don't realize how good we can feel.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. We sort of are in this sort of, I almost think about, I remember when I got glasses and I put glasses on for the first time and I was like, whoa, the world can look like this, right? And I think that nutrition is almost like when we can identify where the gaps are, supplement depending on what our sort of life circumstances are. It's like putting on glasses because sometimes I wish I could just bottle up how good it is to feel good, because when we realize that is what we're capable of, it changes things. But I think we get caught in the monotony of day to day and we're just used to going around without glasses on. And so when we can do these things, it's also empowering. When we think about, there's so many things in this world that we cannot control, right? But there are certain things that we can control. And focusing on food and where there's gaps, filling those in with supplementation, with different, if we are noticing we need more green leafy vegetables, whatever it is. But when we can control those things, what we do know is that autonomy, so this idea of focusing on what we can control, is more of a predictor of our happiness than how good looking we are, how popular we are, how attractive we are, or how good our sex life is. So it's a big player. And one of the ways that we can take some autonomy, right, some agency, is to identify what are those things that we can do. And when it's, taking a multivitamin or fish oil or whatever it is for each person, when we do that, we're showing ourselves that we're taking some control of our health.